let me take you through the year and to some of the events which happened in each of the months of the year, pretty much each of the months. And then having been through this, we'll pick up some of the themes and take them forward for discussion. So, by the way, one of the big events for us happened just before the year started. And that was Jeremy Corbyn was deposed.
Yeah.
And all of those people had spent a lot of money getting a European citizenship or buying second homes, did it all seemingly for nothing, because in the end he didn't become the prime minister. But that's where we started the year. And therefore, even from a Jewish point of view, we started the year with a very good feeling that England had come to rights, that common sense had prevailed, that it still remains a country in which we are broadly supported by the government, by the ethos of the country, and we were left feeling much more secure than we had been in 2019. So that was a very good start to the year. Then in January, things began to happen which were not of direct consequence to us, but which should nevertheless have given us some concern, and that was the Australian bushfires. The damage caused by the bushfires across Australia reached a total of 18.6 million hectares by March, which is bigger than the total landmass of entire countries like Cuba. That was part of the theme of global warming. We'll come back to that again in August, as it happens. In January, this is before COVID came onto our radars, there were rising tensions between Iran and the United States. Do you remember that there was a United States airstrike that incinerated the car of General Qasem Soleimani, who was a security mastermind, one of Iran's most powerful military strategists? And US officials were claiming that Iran or the Nisht were planning an imminent attack. But the tensions escalated. We were uncertain about President Trump's use of military power, and the US House of Representatives tried to pass a bill to try and restrict his use of military power. On January the 23rd, Chinese authorities imposed a quarantine in Wuhan. This was the first we heard of this new new danger. By March, the spread of this coronavirus was becoming a serious concern to countries. And much more important, it seems, than patient 0 was patient 31. The patient 31 was in South Korea, and it was a confirmed COVID-19 case. And this was the beginning of the rapid spread of the virus to potentially up to 1,160 contacts in that country. And it served a warning to the rest of the world about how quickly the virus could spread. By the way, just to put this now into context, the estimate is that there have been 73 million infections, 1.6 million recorded deaths, but the presumption is that there are many, many, many millions more of unrecorded deaths. And in poorer countries like India, the cost was significantly higher because left without work, the migrant laborers tried to return to their family homes, and it was the greatest movement of people since partition in 1947. India's economy shrank by 25% between April and June. In March, when the coronavirus now became a reality, the Standard & Poor 500, which in the United States is the most watched stock exchange in the world, lost over 1/3 of its value in a single month. It's the fastest 30% decline ever recorded on any benchmark index. That was an indication of just how dramatic this whole thing was. Global tourism suffered. the stocks which suffered most were called the beach stocks, not because these are the stocks which you trade when you're on the beach, but because beach stands for booking, entertainment, live events, airlines, cruises and casinos, hotels and resorts. That's beach. And they were the ones which were most impacted by the worldwide travel bans. In March, lockdown life began for all of us. From toilet paper hoarding to limits on gatherings, the pandemic's immediate effects became clear on our surroundings. Daily life came to a standstill. Commuter activity in major cities plummeted throughout the month. One of the unintended positive consequences of these shutdowns was that air pollution steeply dropped, and a graph became known throughout the world as the most important graph that anybody had ever looked at, and that was the graph which said flatten the curve. The great concern, remember, about if we had to flatten the curve in order to be able to avoid our hospitals and our emergency rooms becoming overcrowded to the point where they couldn't cope. That's more or less around about the time that our schools shut down, which came as something of a shock because our schools had not shut down at any time in our history, even during the darkest days of the Blitz. We'd continued to be able to pray in Minyanim. This was an historic event for the Jewish community. Of course, at the same time in April came all the enormous, amazing stimuli, both here in this country with people being placed on furlough, and the United States, a 2 trillion CARES Act came into law. In April as well, Saudi Arabia decided to institute a price war with Russia on oil. And for the first time in history, oil prices went negative, down to a stunning minus $37.63 on April the 20th. What this meant was that producers actually paid traders to take oil off their hands. This was another sign, by the way, of relating to the changing world and global warming, which we'll come back to in a moment. And then in May, just in case we hadn't had enough fun just yet, we had the Black Lives Matter. I can't breathe. These few words sparked the ongoing flames of a significant movement, BLM, after the killing of George Floyd on May the 25th. There were over 7,750 Black Lives Matters linked demonstrations over a 3-month period throughout the world, which was absolutely extraordinary. And then, of course, it led to the pulling down of statues and the rise of identity politics, and a whole new way of engaging now with public protests. By the way, 93% of the protests were peaceful, according to the statistics. In May, as we go through this exciting year, the dramatic shift to staying at home resulted in a much higher reliance on technology for many people, the results of which we are experiencing at this very moment. I ask you, how many of you at this time last year knew of the 4-letter word ZOOM? And by today, of course, we're all aficionados. So the monthly swell of people on Zoom corresponded to a decline in air travel. And in May, Zoom's market capitalization had skyrocketed to eclipse the income, the turnover of the top 7 airlines by revenue combined. Isn't that astonishing?
Wow.
In July of this past year, Tesla became the world's most valuable automaker. its market valuation climbed over 375% since June 2019, heralding a whole new attitude towards the use of fossil fuels in this world. A little bit later, of course, the British government set a limit on the date, set a date by which we would no longer be permitted to drive cars with petrol or diesel. But what happened by July was that big tech's dominance in the world had become established. The market capitalization of just 6 stocks, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Alphabet, which of course is the parent company of Amazon, and Microsoft, grew by over 500%, whereas the Standard & Poor's index rose by just 110%. So big tech has come to dominate our lives. That was in July. Lucky there are only 12 months of the year, isn't it? In August, we had the Beirut explosion. Remember that? It was the biggest accident of its kind in modern history. It claimed 135 lives, but it affected over 305,000 people, and it was considered to be the extent of the damage was absolutely huge, and it came about as a result of poor storage. The financial cost of the explosion is estimated at about $15 billion from that little accident. In August, we come back to where we started the year in January. In January, we had the fires in Australia. In August, we had the US wildfire season. And there were air quality reached hazardous for long stretches of time across many parts of the United States, particularly in California and Oregon. While some of the wildfires were caused by natural occurrences like lightning strikes, an overwhelming majority, 85 to 90% happen because of human causes, such as discarded cigarettes and campfire debris. But global warming, once again, was at work. In August as well, we had the issues relating to China and Hong Kong, draconian national security law to crush anti-government unrest, which has a particular impact upon the United Kingdom, as we were the ones who handed the territory over to China with certain kinds of safeguards, which by now they were flaunting. In November, we had the US presidential election. By the way, just as a point of interest, the United States election spending hit over $13 billion, more than twice the amount of the entire amount spent on the 2016 election. President Biden was the first candidate to raise $1 billion, while Trump raised $560 million. It is staggering when you compare it to British elections and the amounts that we spend on our elections here. It's almost iniquitous, isn't it?
Yeah.
By December, we had arrived at COVID-19's third wave, and the average number of new daily cases in America were 100,000 cases a day, and global cases soared to over 60 million, and it is trending upward all the time. And then as we come to the end of the year in December, at last, some good news. Global vaccination effort kicks off, and we all are waiting for that all-important letter to arrive on our doorstep inviting us to be at a certain place at a certain time to get a little prick on our arm, which is apparently going to make our lives completely different. And another one a few weeks later. And in December, just in the nick of time, we did a deal with Europe called Brexit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your review of 2020. 20. Doesn't make very happy reading. So what are the themes that we're going to draw from this that are going to be now for discussion over the next period of time? Well, I've noted down just a few. We won't be able to talk about all of them unless we continue talking from now until New Year. So obviously one of the big themes is Corona. And as a result of Corona, the issues relating to home working, future of retail, tech dominance, the cooperation, new cooperation amongst scientists throughout the world, the whole issues relating to relationships, communities, people, etc. There's the theme of global warming, which came through in the fires and the end of the oil era that we are maybe coming to. The whole theme of Black Lives Matter with identity politics and statues and our colonial past, taking the knee. Would you take the knee? All the PC language today, which one has to be so careful of when one speaks. The rise of China is a fascinating one. Its territorial ambitions, its relationship with America, the issues relating to Hong Kong. Of course, there's Brexit to speak about. And if we want to talk about Israel, there are probably 3 or 4 themes over there. The way in which they managed Corona, the corruption charges, and the search for immunity by the Prime Minister, the regional peace deals, and of course its relationship with Iran. And of course, one of the big themes we can talk about is the impact of all of this upon community, upon our own lives, etc., because much of these other things are slightly more remote to us, and the things which concern us most are our own lives in our own spaces. Those are the issues I throw open for discussion, and I think we should start with Corona. Let me, by the way, tell you about some of the findings about home working. Probably everybody around over here in some way or another has done some working from home. Okay, so it turns out that in a survey of the positive benefits of remote working, 11% of people who were home working said it gave them more time with the family. 21% said the biggest benefit was that there was no commuting. 26% said being able to work from any location. And 32% said it gave them a flexible schedule. But when you looked at the top struggles of remote workers, 22% said the biggest difficulty was unplugging after work, because there's no longer any kind of demarcation between work and home. 19% complained of loneliness. 17% said the problem was in relation to collaborating and communication. The most spoken words in 2020, I would say the most spoken word in history, by the way, the most spoken word in history is oops. But the most spoken word in 2020 was, I can't hear you, you're on mute.
Mute yourself.
10% said distractions at home were a problem. 8% different time zones from the rest of the team. 8% said staying motivated. 7% said the biggest problem was taking vacation time. And 3% said, my biggest problem is reliable Wi-Fi. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah.
Only 3%.
So let's talk for a moment about the impact of Corona on our lives. Let me hand over to all of you to tell us, here's the question. In overall terms, what impact has the coronavirus had on your life in this past year? Just unmute yourself to speak up, or you can also just press your space bar, by the way, and it does the same thing.
Are you including lockdown, or you mean just the illness?
No, I'm including lockdown. I'm talking about the experience of the past year in lockdown with Corona, the effect of Corona on our lives.
Shlomo?
Yes.
David.
Yes.
And I've been living in Sri Lanka for the last 38 years. And for the first time, I think ever, I've been here for a long time. I've been here since March. I came here for 5 days and I went back to Colombo via Doha and was told that I couldn't go in. And therefore I came on the next plane back, and I've been here for 9 months. And this is a trauma of great interest, and obviously rediscovering London, rediscovering what it's like to be in one place without getting on an aeroplane, but also discovering family, discovering how to go through things that I've never done before or haven't looked at before. It's been an eye-opener how to use time better. And of course, with Zoom, one's able to manage one's business reasonably with Teams as well. I didn't hear anyone talk about the 5-letter word Teams as well. One able to communicate with the office, and one is able to switch off as well and switch on when they need it. There's none of that waiting for people or traveling. So it's been a great eye-opener for me, and it's certainly enjoyable. And I can't wait to go back to Colombo in March, please God, after the vaccine. But in the meantime, making the most of every day.
Thank you, David.
I kind of agree.
Andrea.
Yes.
Andrea want to say something. Come back to you in a moment, Leslie.
I've learned to be more self-reliant. Obviously, I can't work. There are no tourists, so no tour guiding, and it was probably time to retire anyway. I had no choice in it. I've learned to just enjoy going for walks with friends around Golders Hill Park. I've enjoyed just being in the house, doing things in the garden, leading a calmer life. I came out of hospital again yesterday, unexpectedly. And I'm really very pleased to be here this morning with you all. I'm sorry, feeling a bit tearful. I'm just grateful for everything that Charlotte put on, which made us feel very included, all the marvellous talks on Sunday, and I'm grateful to belong to the community.
Thank you, Andrea. Wish you well and wish you good health in the coming year. Leslie?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree more or less like David, but without the Sri Lanka element, because everything changed. Everything changed. I teach English as a second language. We immediately switched to online. And at least one of my students, I think quite a lot of what we're doing is because she's a young woman and she's alone in her flat. She's working, but she is alone all day. Occasional walk with a friend or something. So it's nice to be able to provide that. But I agree with Andrea, this kind of slower pace, a quieter life, and you know, something you always resolve not to rush around like a mad thing. And now you have to, especially as I've also now broken my ankle, that slowed me again. And I think the other big thing is I do feel a greater sense of belonging to this community. I've been here a long time, but these Zoom things, there's something about this sitting and looking at other people's faces, which is not quite the same as standing next to or near someone in shul. I think it's been a hugely valuable thing.
Yeah.
Susie, I saw you nodding your head. Susie Kaufman. You need to unmute. It's been said one more time.
As opposed to mute. I agree that the shul have put on fantastic talks, etc. And you do feel, I always feel part of this community. I love it. And it has, I think it's brought everyone closer. There is no doubt about it. And thank you.
Does anybody want to disagree? So,
Oh, that's good.
Lots of work has gone into it from all of you.
A lot.
Enormous
I agree.
amount of work.
can I say something very, very non-PC?
Yes.
I'm afraid the session is being recorded and I might be pilloried for this. I don't want in any way to negate the terrible, terrible suffering, you know, of many, many millions of people, and the bereavements which we've had in our own community because of COVID, and in other communities as well. So I'm not wanting to say something which is heartless or insensitive, you know, to the bigger picture. But for people like us, who I always say we are in the upper echelon, upper 1% of the most fortunate human beings on the planet
Okay.
in terms of our socioeconomic opportunities, the fact that we live in a liberal democracy, the security which we have in our lives, the fact that we go to sleep at night and we are secure. There's nobody who's going to be banging on our door.
Yeah.
You know, these things which we just take for granted, which were not taken for granted 70 years ago, 75 years ago, you know, and that as Jews, we can live with security, etc., all of these things. So for people like us who are a million miles away from those migrant Indian workers who traipse across, you know, India to going back to absolute abject poverty, migrant workers and others throughout the world, is it possible for us to say, I've had a good COVID?
Yeah.
Or is that just too insensitive?
No, not at all.
No.
No.
No, I think that's a very good way of putting it.
I think we're blessed, and although we've had births, deaths, and marriages, everybody's had some really tragic times, and you can't escape them. Personally, you know, watching the world go by, I think even business not working, you know, people, sorry, my hair's just gone mad, even, you know, not working for several months. And I just do think we're blessed. I think there by the grace of God go I, and everybody else's sentiments about the community, which is incredible, because had you have not been here, you wouldn't have got through those terribly difficult times, Zoom funerals, Zoom shivers, which for many people, you know, I'm not saying they enjoyed it more, but there was more interaction than you could ever have in a shiver house. So as a community, I think we're incredible. I think we've probably all got a story to say. We've done things we would never have done with lockdown. We don't have Shabbos lunch normally. We either go out or come home and go to sleep. And for the last 7 months, we've done that every single day, every single weekend. And it's just something we never normally did, because we all sort of crashed out and did our own thing. As I say, I went to people's houses. The sun shone and we managed to get through a very difficult period, but people had it so much worse. So with the help of an amazing community, with Ellie, with you, with the team, and just people coming together, it could have been a lot worse. So no, it's, I feel, you know, blessed, and I'm sure other people don't. So I do get that, but
because what we're hearing from people when, you know, asked a question about COVID, nobody has popped up and said, you know, it's been the most terrible, awful time for me. I've felt awfully isolated, terribly lonely. I've been frightened. I have felt that if, God forbid, I were to become ill from something else, I wouldn't, you know, would not want to go to a hospital. I have not been able to access my GP. There are so many negatives. And yet, when I asked the question, tell me about your COVID, a few people who answered all wanted to say things which are positive. My life is actually, lots of good things have happened for me in my life. Are we just being optimistic and putting the best, I'll come back to you in a moment, Andrew, I'm putting the best shine on what has been a very difficult period, and, you know, we're just showing a brave face, or is it genuine the fact that we are, you know, we are looking at, in overall terms, when you look back, the hard parts have receded and the good parts have come to the fore. Andrea?
I actually think almost every day I've thought, I'm so lucky. We live lovely part of London, got money to buy food, put on the table. We are so fortunate. We have friends and community around us. Last week I was suddenly very ill and they took me into hospital and looked after me. My friends being here in and out looking out. I just feel very grateful to live where I do. I think we're lucky. And also I'm actually very grateful to be as old and ancient as I am and not a young person. I think it's much harder for younger people going forward. I'm just grateful for everything.
Well, you've touched on a very interesting point over here, because most of the people who have joined all of our Zoom sessions, including this one, but this has been a feature throughout the entire period. I'm
not in the first flush of youth.
Pardon?
I'm not in the first flush.
Slightly, I don't want to be rude to myself or to anybody else, but slightly older people. And our young members, our young families, and our young people have actually not participated in any of the Zooms. Is that because they've been having a much harder time, or is it because
Possibly.
they've been having a better time and they don't need this community connection?
They don't need it. I think it's because they don't need it.
Mm.
But this is a very. Can I,
Well, hang on a second, we have Richard Starr, who's a representative of the younger generation. Richard.
Well, actually, I was just wondering if we did fall into that bracket, or if we were too old.
No,
But,
no, you are the exception. You are the exception to the rule.
Well, I've been listening in. It's so fascinating. I think actually, I'm not sure this directly answers the question, but one of the things that really struck me is how we have missed the routine of our lives, and you know, the going to work, going to school, having that structure every single day. And you know, something you said, Rabbi, was that when the vaccine comes, it will make our lives so much better. And actually, all the vaccine will do is make our lives go back to normal. And that for us now is seen as, you know, so much better because of what we've lived through this year. And you know, we also have been very fortunate. We've been able to work. You know, our kids have managed to do some schoolwork whilst at home, and now, you know, thankfully they are back at school. But it's, for me, it's really struck me how much we need that routine and that structure, and when we don't have it all goes to pot.
It's interesting that you say that because, well, let me see if anybody else wants to say anything first.
Can I add?
Yes, Pamela.
There's a few things. One, not personal, but as far as things being easy, of course, the criminal justice system at some stage came to a halt at Crown Court from over cases not being heard through funding. But the legal system's been going on with all the risks that people have had and having to attend at certain stages, but the transport system is much emptier. Secondly, we mustn't forget the loneliness. Sorry, my dog's now barking.
I think your dog wants to say something, either agree or disagree.
Saying that he's had me at home a lot more, I think, is what he's trying to say. And those of us who've got pets have been lucky, but we remember those who are on their own. And I agree that there's been no format or scheduling. I think I'd like to thank everyone who's enabled food to be distributed, because we can't forget, whilst some of us are okay, those in cramped houses and JW3 and other groups have been helping, because there is a massive number of people who've been out of work or lost their work. So whilst there have been positive signs on the Pollyanna, we are alive. Some people aren't, of course. We have to thank those who have had problems with every day paying their rents or paying their food. I'd certainly like to say the Zooms have been amazing. The shul has been fantastic, and everyone who's contributed to it. But whilst we look for good things in it, there have been obviously the side effects. And I only hope that people will be able to recover after this has all come to an end. So I don't think the work is finished, because there are going to be many people now who are going to need help, and the food banks and everything else that's going on at the moment. And I think as a community, I'm very proud how we've been helping those less fortunate.
So that leads me to the next question, and that is, which part of what has happened in COVID, both for us immediately as a community and that which we've seen in the wider community as a result of COVID, which parts of those things do we think that we need to retain and carry forward? Let me put it in graphic terms. Supposing as a result of vaccinations, etc., by the springtime, by Pesach time, we're able to go back to something which resembles life before COVID, in terms of our community life and our synagogue services, in our activities in the synagogue, etc. What has been so important during this time that we would not want to ditch it and forget it?
I think one of the main things that struck me is connection, not only with the shul, which of course has been wonderful, but individual connection. Picking up a phone and seeing how somebody is, saying, do you want to meet me for a walk, just so you see a face rather than just things on a screen. And I think that connection has been so important.
I agree.
I think also for families, it's been really, really hard not being able to be with their children and grandchildren. So I think, and I also have single friends who are really suffering, single or on their own friends, who are used to having a very big family life, are really, really suffering. And although Zoom is lovely, and I really enjoy Zoom, it's not the same. And you turn Zoom off and the person's not there. So I think it's a mixed blessing really. So I think the human contact.
So I think that what we have all learned, not just us as a Jewish community, but one of the features that has emerged out of COVID is that we have actually become a more caring community across the board. People have gone out of their way to care and to think about others and to help others. I think the Queen put it very beautifully when she spoke about, of course, it's not our parable, but the parable of the Good Samaritan. The person who stops at the wayside and helps somebody who's not of his religion, not of his background, not of his etc., but has reached out and be prepared to connect with somebody who's very different. You saw this outpouring of support for the NHS and for nurses, because caring touches people's hearts very, very deeply. Now, we've always said we are a caring community, but I'm not sure that actually we have really been a caring community. And I think we've learned some new tricks, been forced to learn some new tricks in COVID. And I would not like to see them disappear. And I would not like to see them disappear in the community at large as a theme. And interestingly enough, the Economist, in one of its leaders this week, in its Christmas edition, concludes with a paragraph which reads as follows: many people under lockdown have asked themselves what matters most in life. Governments should take that as their inspiration, focusing on policies that promote individual dignity, self-reliance, and civic pride. They should recast welfare and education and take on concentrations of entrenched power so as to open up new thresholds for their citizens. Something good can come from the misery of the plague year. It should include a new social contract fit for the 21st century. Well, those are very powerful words, and it throws down a gauntlet to government as well and to leaders to say that you have to take account of some of the fundamental shifts which have happened in society as a result of this. Of course, there are certain kinds of commercial shifts. We know that some of the things which are happening before, trends which began before COVID, have accelerated. The demise of retail shopping, and the growth of online shopping. Some of the other issues relating to the growth of technology, of AI, artificial intelligence, the green movement, etc. All of these are major shifts which are happening in society around us, and COVID has helped to accelerate them and to bring them forward. But beyond that, or perhaps beneath that, there's been a fundamental shift in human attitudes of people one to the other, and the understanding of what governments can do for people in terms of welfare, in terms of caring, what we can do for each other in terms of caring. And those are precious, precious lessons which have emerged. And if we fail to capitalize on these, we will have lost anything positive out of a plague. Now the question is, how do we grasp that nettle? And I bring it down simply to the part which is within our immediate control. How as a community do we grasp that nettle? What do we do now that begins to change in terms of the way in which we not just hold our own community together, but the way in which we care for those beyond our community, people of other faith, etc., in the area in which we live? And I've always, argued that, everybody knows Camden is a divided borough. There's a north and a south. We live in the affluent north, but just south of where we live, there's enormous poverty and deprivation, etc. Do we do things that accelerate that? Are there other things that we could do? How do we continue to hold community together? What is the continued role of Zoom, of this alongside physical? I haven't worked it out yet. I don't know the answers to this. They are conundrums. I can only say for myself that I will echo, some of the things that others have said about the pleasantness of life under COVID. Lindy and my lives, from a community point of view, have changed radically. I mean, Shabbat has suddenly become a wonderful day again. Today when we just spend time, without the pressures of community and everything else, and not on duty, not sort of having to, pumping it out all the time, etc. It's just, not traveling, not running to do shivers, all that stuff. But my goodness me, I miss people. I miss connection.
Yes.
This can't be a substitute. It can be something which we can have as an adjunct, but it can't be a substitute. I wouldn't want to lose Zoom. It's been too precious. It does things which, are so good. Even the Shia Rim, instead of having to, you can run a class on Zoom without having to come to the, get out and get into your car and come to the synagogue, etc. Is it better to sit around a table and to look at people and to feel the body language and the interaction? Or is it better to just see faces as panels or tiles on a Zoom? It's got to be a both and from this point onwards, not an either or. How we work it through, I don't know. But I know that it has to remain. The telephoning, the welfare, the caring, etc., has to remain. We can't lose that. It's been too precious. It's taken us to a whole new level of community caring. Just being aware of the people who are lonely in the community and trying to reach out to them has been important. And if this would then be, if this would continue to be expressed beyond our own community in other communities, at grassroots, and that communities begin to take much more care of each other, we can change society from grassroots, from bottom up, and we can make demands on our parliamentarians to say, look, there's a different kind of social contract that we're looking for. We want governments to be doing different kinds of things. What we have seen here is the importance for human beings of life. That's what's come through from COVID.
Can I suggest this? Because I think at the moment, the way my view is, I would like to see the shul opening up to all of the community in the shul, extending the groups within the shul, so there's more people. I mean, some of us feel that we've wanted to do things on behalf of the shul, but it's been very restricted to a small number. And I would like to see maybe more individual members of the shul being able to be involved, because I think many might want to be. So I'd like to extend functions of the shul so that we are very much involved in what's going on in the community, both our community and the wider community. So we have a welfare group, we have people continuing to volunteer, but we expand it so that more members of the shul can feel they're involved. Because giving is such an important aspect, particularly it's something that is very cherished. Taking is one thing, but being able to give is something very wonderful. And I think many people might feel they'd like to do more, but maybe aren't needed. And I think we need to feel we're needed in some way.
Is anybody else who has these same sense that they are in some way or another just not sufficiently welcomed into arranging, organizing, being part of, etc.? Yes.
I don't feel we're not welcome, but I would like to say that I would like to do something more for the shul. In fact, Linda Sharp and I have discussed something, and we hope to do that something for older members of the shul when we're allowed to do so.
I feel the same. I've mentioned it before. I never know how to volunteer. You see great things being done and think, well, I'd like to do that, but never know who to tell. Or
we all should get together. We should have a meeting and deal with it. You know.
Yes, let's have a meeting on Zoom.
No, this one, Shlomo.
Sorry, I have to go. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to end in a few moments. Can I just move for a moment?
I must tell you that Zoom is far better than the CVPs and the Skypes, because when it comes to I can't hear you, the courts are working on CVP and they send us a link which often doesn't work.
Yes,
so
but
Zoom is something to be proud of.
Yes, but Pamela, just remember, it's not better than Netflix.
Oh, well.
Okay, I just want to come to very quickly to one other topic over here, and that was Black Lives Matter. I just wonder if you were asked to take the knee, whether you would.
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Take the what? I didn't hear what you said.
If you were asked to take the knee, you know, this idea of going down on your knee, you know, which was very controversial.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Not sure.
I think we, having known our history of the persecution, should feel that or associate the problems of discrimination and racism. We were brought up with it. I mean, I wasn't long after it. So I think as our population, as Jewish people, we have to understand how discrimination is so wrong, and it has to be really weeded out.
And the way in which it has evolved into looking at colonial history and tearing down statues, etc. Of anybody who had a tainted history in regard to race, etc. What's your feeling about that in terms of English history, our sense of belonging, our sense of empire, and all those things which make us so English?
They should put them in the mud and.
Hang on a second, Pamela. I just want some comments from some others as well, if you don't mind. All comments are always welcome, but I want to hear some others as well.
So this is Sharon again. I personally feel that it's really important to learn. You know, I mean, if you just think about the Holocaust, everyone says, you know, you have to talk about it to prevent these things happening again. And I think, you know, putting all these figures of colonialism and people who were involved in the race trade, I think, you know, shutting the door on them and only teaching the bad stuff actually just then sends a distorted message about history. You know, I think I totally agree that the curriculum should be wider, but I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with just tearing down statues. You know, I think taking the knee is a very personal issue. I personally probably wouldn't, because I don't think that it necessarily represents enough for me to do it, rather than just for symbolism.
Right. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts before we close for today? Anybody else want to comment?
You can't just forget history. And a lot of our history is tied up with such people, the people whose statues are being torn down or being talked about taking down.
Yes.
It is our history. You can't forget it. You're right. It has to be taught alongside the bad things.
Yeah.
So would you leave statues of Hitler up?
No.
No, I wouldn't.
A good
We didn't have any in England, as far as I know.
I don't remember seeing any. I certainly wouldn't want to leave them up, no.
All right, everyone. Now, look, a minor miracle has occurred. We've been speaking for just about an hour from the time that we started. We've spoken about Corona, about Black Lives Matters. The miracle is that in this 1 hour, we haven't spoken about Israel. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
No, not amazing, Shlomo. You never brought the topic up. Otherwise, I'm sure.
I'm sure we would. Well, we'll have another discussion about that. Can I end for today just to express, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I feel enormously optimistic about 2021 and about the future. Not just because of the impending vaccine, etc. But I think that I really do believe that some very significant things have happened in the course of this past year. Some very terrible things have happened, but some very important changes have happened in society at lots of different levels, which are going to impact upon the world in positive ways in the coming years. And we've just seen the beginning of all that. I have no idea where Brexit is going to lead. I personally didn't vote for Brexit. I voted to remain, as I suspect most of us on this call did.
Yeah.
We are where we are. We don't know where that's going to lead. I don't know what the world is going to look like immediately after vaccinations, to what extent we'll come back. But what I do know is that we're faced with a number of challenges to take some of the important things which have happened and to try and turn them to the advantage of mankind. The most important being the discovery that of the power of love and of caring. That must be the most important thing to emerge. The power of people to work together in unison, as a scientist and sharing their information, the power of science to be able to make our lives better, the realization that global warming is something which we do need to take very seriously as a result of the fires, etc., that we see, the actual changes happening in our lives, the sense of that the world is moving into a new phase in relation to fossil fuels, the power of technology to change our working lives, our traveling lives, and so many other things. A balance of power, of course, because as we've seen, the tech companies have become enormously powerful, etc. Philanthropy has been a major issue. By the way, there is an astonishing statistic. Let me see if I can find it about I don't see it immediately, but I saw a statistic about how the richest people in the world have become incredibly rich, more than one could possibly imagine. But a lot of them are sharing their wealth and using it for good purposes. A whole sort of sea change in relation to philanthropy amongst the world's richest, all of which is really very, very positive. So for me, it's not always a positive person, by the way. I actually feel quite positive, and I think we have to grasp the nettle. We can make changes. It happens at grassroots. It happens in places like our community. We create little fires, they spread, and they become bigger fires. And I think we can change the world for the better in 2021. I certainly hope so. I don't know whether you share that optimism or you feel less optimistic, but that's probably the best note on which to end before anybody destroys all of my arguments and says, no, I'm totally pessimistic and the world's going to be an awful place. That would be a terrible place for us to end today. I hope that you have at least found the hour spent together a pleasant one, just for being able to see each other and just for a little bit of discussion, one with the other, about the things which are important to us in all of our lives.